It's not something that you really should do logically. This role has been interpreted so beautifully.
I think the Joker would like 30 Seconds to Mars.
I'm going to discuss the worst of the best. The most awful take on something awesome. I'm talking, of course, about Jared Leto's time as the Joker. Now, this is definitely not something that's been understated. I think almost universally as a society, we've come to accept that Jared Leto was almost as awful in these movies as he is in real life. Yet still, this iteration of the character does have some fans, which confuses me almost as much as Jared Leto still having some fans. So, I guess it fits. Now, for all the bad and bizarre things that could be said for Jared Leto, like how the man is literally currently a cult leader, he isn't a bad actor. Or at least he wasn't at one point in time. Because I don't know what happened here. I don't know what inspired Jared Leto to play the Joker as if he were the human embodiment of a non-stop cringe compilation, but I really wish he would stop smoking it. The Joker is so irredeemably bad that he not only fails the character that he's based on, but just also fails as a character in general.
I could tell you meant that.
He's an attack on the audience's senses, harmful to viewers' eyes and ears, and the taste buds of anyone who has taste. If we're going to talk about how this guy fails, I mean, this guy fails on every level. Let's just start with the way that he looks. Alright, I think that speaks for itself. Let's move on. It would be that easy. Honestly, that's all it takes. But I'll go ahead and dissect just why this is so awful. First off, he doesn't resemble the character that he's based on in any way, shape, or form. Not even slightly. There have been all different types of iterations of this character, and this looks like none of them. I mean, the lack of effort that was put into this character design is honestly some next level stuff. They just gave Punkos Crunk over here green hair and a purple glove and went, alright, that's that, let's move on. What's next? What were they even going for? The grills, the tattoos? Even all these years later, I can't seem to convince myself that this is real. This isn't even a fever dream, it's a fever nightmare ripped into our reality, Freddy Krueger style. Even if we completely forget about who it is he's supposed to be portraying, this is beyond goofy. The guy's posing as if he's auditioning for Home Alone 7, and he's got this weird, I was a huge MySpace star in 2007 aesthetic. He looks like an album cover I would have bought in an old school Hot Topic. If this Joker was a product, he would be sold at Spencer's. Generally speaking, I'm not really in favor of a tatted up Joker. That's coming from a guy who's got tattoos. That just doesn't seem like his style to me. It doesn't seem to fit the character. If I could look past that and just judge these tattoos for what they are, it looks like they put as much thought into this character's tattoos as I put into my own tattoos that I got when I was 18. I mean, seriously, what are these tattoos? Jester cap, smiles, playing cards, ha ha ha. Oh, I get it, 'cause Joker. Yeah, no, that's good. That's clever. Took me a second there because it's very subtle. Then they put damaged across his forehead because they really thought they were making some sort of statement with that one. Look at the tragic beauty. This movie in general has all the depth of a 2000s music video, and yet it wants to act like it's artsy. You know, it's like a weird thing to be pretentious in. They should have saved themselves time instead of putting that across Jared Leto's head just printed right across the cover of the script. The only one that stands out to me as not being entirely terrible is the dead bird with the arrow going through it. That's not a bad reference, honestly. Everything else is awful, but that one's almost something. I really loathe the fact that they tried to justify the Joker's namesake by getting him a set of grills. That is such a dumb idea for the character, and it seems like their attempt to make a change just to say that they made a change. I think what's most striking about this is the absolute lack and overall resentment of subtlety this version of the character has. It may be the most loud, in-your-face, gross versions of the character, and I'm saying this including the one who literally ripped his own face off. Now, to its credit, this look does demand attention, and it is quite shocking to look at, which I sort of think is in tune with the character. This guy looks like he's always the center of attention and the topic of conversation. He's so over the top in presentation that how could you not notice him? And if his appearance wasn't loud enough, he himself certainly is. Just as distinct and recognizable as his aesthetic is his equally repulsive voice. which is really all over the place. At times, it sounds like your friend's worst Heath Ledger impression, just with an added sense of uncertainty and inflection and squeaky grunts. And at other times, it just sounds like an actor desperately trying to fake a voice he practiced twice through a set of prosthetics that were superglued onto his teeth. But even worse than his speaking voice, his laugh is so unsettling. But not like creepy unsettling, like annoying unsettling. He doesn't sound menacing, he just sounds like a dude with a strange laugh. I mean, it's weird, sure, but it's not, scary. The guy just sounds like he found something hysterical while he had a cold. Which leads me to ask, how did this guy get cast in this role? You cast a Joker who can't laugh? Or act, apparently? It just seems like that would be a pretty integral part of the character that you think would make or break a performance. The character doesn't get any better when it comes to characterization. He carries next to no qualities of the character that he's based on. I think out of everyone to ever play the character, he looks the most clueless in the role. But to his credit, he's also very confident in his incompetence. Jared Leto proudly struts around and puts passion into every part of this performance. You can really tell that he tried. Like, you could tell that he really tried. Really hard. He tried too hard. And because of that, the Joker comes off as very try-hard. There's never a moment with the character on screen where he feels genuine or authentic. There are definitely moments where you can feel the original character's unpredictability come through this performance, because you never know what he'll do next, and you'll never guess why he did it. In those ways, he feels true to the spirit of the source. But in every other way, he feels like a soulless attempt at modernizing a timeless classic. On some level, it feels like this movie was really trying to replicate Heath Ledger's performance, at least conceptually. Trying to depict the Joker as the mere concept of chaos. Except, this isn't the right movie for that type of character. That version of the Joker simply wouldn't work in this environment. That's a complex, three-dimensional character, and this is a very doofy comic book movie that prides itself with how edgy it is. This is neither the right time nor the right place for that type of character. Completely wrong enclosure. On top of that, it doesn't seem like the writing team could articulate the character's nature, so they just have the Joker come out and say,
I am not someone who is loved. I'm an idea.
Being that movies are a visual medium, the idea is to show and not tell. This not only tells and doesn't show, but this also insists upon itself. I am an idea. I guess to be fair, The Dark Knight's Joker spent a lot of the runtime self-analyzing his own actions as well. Guy's dialogue made it seem like he was writing a thesis for the movie that he was in. But at least in that case, the lines felt thought out and well written. Entirely inauthentic to the way real humans speak and would address situations, but well written and articulated nonetheless. To call Jared Leto's Joker a discount dollar store version of Heath Ledger's Joker would still be an insult to Heath Ledger. Ledger's Joker had depth, whereas I could stand in a puddle of Leto's Joker and not get wet. Because of this variant of the character essentially spitting in the face of subtlety while being showcased as an absolute nitwit, it's especially hard to buy into a lot of the stories surrounding the character. I can't imagine a lunatic like him would wind up running a mob. I can imagine him dabbling in the criminal underworld, but taking it over seems like an impossibility. Much more importantly, it's hard for me to imagine that this Joker would be able to charm and seduce Harley into a life of villainy. It is still absolutely maddening to me how this movie depicted the Madman. If we're judging the performance based on the outrageousness of the character, then we could say it's a solid interpretation of Batman's greatest foe. However, what's missing is the reason, the method behind the madness. The Joker doesn't do things to serve his cause or further his agendas in this. And mind you, every Joker, even the self-proclaimed anarchists, all have agendas. This guy just does things to do them. Joker's unpredictable, sure, and while he definitely can't be reasoned with, he still does things with reason. There's a purpose for his actions. This Joker's just missing the plot, which makes sense as he's hardly even involved in the one that he's in. Another big reason this version of the character is so lackluster is because there isn't much of a Batman and Joker dynamic presented in this line of films. They're enemies with a history, sure, but their relationship is tragically underwritten and not given any attention. Joker just comes off as any other villain to Batman. And Batman really comes off as someone who gets in the way of Joker's plans. Where is the borderline obsession Joker has for the Bat? The hatred wrapped up in awe and curiosity. There's none of that.
I think that, the Bat is a lot of fun.
In its place, we got Ronnie Radke trying to look like a SoundCloud rapper. Excluding Batman from the Joker story isn't impossible. Joaquin Phoenix is having a pretty good run in a Batman-less Joker universe, but that fact is much harder to overlook when a Batman and a Joker are shown to exist in the same universe, but have limited interaction. The few bits where we see this Batman and Joker collide are not great, and it to me shows a fundamental misunderstanding of the Joker character overall. Suicide Squad paints a picture that's an imperfect portrait. In this, Batman's just sort of a nuisance to Joker. He gets in his way of having fun, he stops his crime spree. A more accurate depiction of the two would see Batman be what inspires Joker's latest crime spree, because getting one over on Batman is the Joker's way of having fun. The truth of the matter is, these movies didn't really give us the Joker. They gave us Harley Quinn's boyfriend, because that's the Joker's role in this universe. He's introduced merely as a backdrop for Harley, he plays his part in her origin story, and then after that, he has no purpose. He is her plus one. He is just an extension of the Harley Quinn character. In Suicide Squad, he's only there to set up his significant other. And then by Birds of Prey, they've already broken up off screen. He's still mentioned a lot in that movie, but that's mainly because it's a Harley Quinn-led movie, and that's his purpose, to play a part in the life of Harley Quinn. That is the focal point for this character in this line of films. He's Harley's man, sometimes. I usually don't blame actors for their portrayals in movies, at least not in full. I think a lot of the blame has to ultimately fall on the director and those in charge of creative. That's why you have a lot of actors who've won prestigious awards and Razzies alike. It's all about who's in charge creatively. But in this case, Jared Leto was granted a lot of creative freedom, and it seems like both he and David Ayer sort of carved out the character themselves.
How much say did you actually have in the look of the Joker?
A lot. David Ayer and I really collaborated on the Joker.
This is their creative baby, and I really wish that it would have been aborted. If this is their shared vision, as The Offspring once sang, you gotta keep them separated. Jared Leto was the master of his own destiny and destruction in this line of films, in this cinematic universe. Now, with all this being said, I'm willing to admit two things about this version of the character. One, I thought he and Margot Robbie worked very well together at times. That one scene of Joker performing Harley's rechristening, I think that's actually kind of great. I find it to be that movie's main highlight. While I think Jared Leto's Joker was completely intolerable throughout that entire movie, I do, however, think that Margot Robbie made him a little bit less intolerable. And two, despite it being entirely unneeded and completely unnecessary, and even though it was included in an extended ending epilogue that never needed to exist, Zack Snyder directed Jared Leto to a significantly better performance with a better overall character design. That scene in Zack Snyder's Justice League gave us everything that was missing in his prior depiction. We definitely get a better insight into his relationship with Batman. The obsession is suddenly present. Batman doesn't seem like an annoyance to the clown, but instead a driving factor. Although the clown does seem very much like an annoyance to him, which is right up the right alley. The Joker's speech pattern is also much better here, and much closer to the original character. Unfortunately, he's still being played by Jared Leto, so you still get lines like this.
Besides, who's gonna give you a reach around?
But, what can you do? It can only be so good. This is honestly the best use of this version of the character, and I think that in this one scene, it's good enough to be a passable performance. It's not great by any means, but it's pretty okay. And pretty okay is an upgrade of seismic proportions in compared to the travesty that came before it. If we would have gotten more of this version of the character, I think everyone, myself included, would have been much more favorable of him. But I still don't think that he would have made a lot of top 10 lists. Seeing what we got and what we could have gotten makes this feel like a real missed opportunity. Jared Leto's Joker could have been better. I don't think he was ever going to be a great Joker, but I do think he might have been able to be a good one. Under the right supervision, given the right guidance, and given significantly less creative control. Ultimately, without a shadow of a doubt, for all the reasons I've listed, and even a couple more that I haven't, I believe this is the all-time worst Joker. Usually this is the part where I ask you to leave a comment, but in lieu of a phrase to repeat, I'm going to ask that everyone who liked this video let me know by giving me their own take in the comment section below. Was this the worst Joker? Let me know. And if it isn't, then who is? Because I've seen I think almost every Joker, and I don't think that there ever could be one worse than this. I mean, Young Justice is cutting it pretty close. Sorry, Brent. I don't think that there's any worse than this. This is an all-time low.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt your regularly scheduled mayhem to bring you this.
With the excess of Batman projects, you can count on an influx of Jokers. And while there have been some beyond impressive iterations of the Rogue over the years, not every Joker can be Mark Hamill, nor have they been. And that's why today, I'm going to be talking about the worst animated Joker, an honor that goes to Young Justice, who managed to achieve this feat and bring Batman fans the most worthless adaptation of the antagonist ever put to screen. The characters really only appeared twice in that series, and yet that is still too many times. This big bad was bad in a big way. There's just nothing positive about this one whatsoever. From design to depiction, it's just all so unsatisfying. Which is somewhat surprising, as Young Justice usually did a good job at converting comic book characters into cartoons. But this iteration was pretty poor. Nothing about it worked, and that's not even an exaggeration. This Joker was cringeworthy in every way, shape, and form. Hard on the eyes and hard on the ears alike. Sure, the character carried the same slender frame and wardrobe the frail lunatic Fringe from the comics did, but it just didn't look all that great on this clown. Sort of felt like baby's first Joker. The look is just so boring and basic. This didn't look like the clown Prince of Crime. This looked like a pale, out-of-touch, colorblind businessman who's decked out with sideburns that would make the Beatles blush, and canine fangs. There's just nothing unique about this take, which is probably why his appearance was changed in between appearances, with his short second tenure on the show occurring 8 years later. This time he was given longer hair, shorter sideburns, and a more detailed and expressive face. This Joker design was leagues above his previous one, though that's still an incredibly low bar to set. The update is by far better, but neither are exactly ideal. Trust me, those fingerless gloves aren't doing anybody any favors. And while the debut design was changed, what wasn't was the performance, which to me was a much bigger problem, but we'll get to that. This Joker was always made to look goofy, in both appearance and characterization, and I'm not sure if that was their initial intent either. I don't know if they were going for unhinged, unpredictable psychopath and fell short, or they went for a goofy punchline that landed. But either way, it didn't feel like a great use of such an important character of the Batman mythos. While he still had the character's trademark sense of humor, his jokes landed about as often as his punches did. That is to say that they didn't. Again, I don't know if this is a failure or a function of the character, but either way, it's just overall unfortunate. Because the Joker feels less criminal mastermind and more silly, whiny little brat. Even less flattering was the accompanying voice.
Little Miss Poison Ivy spilled the beans! Or whatever grows on grapevines. I'm not a horticulturist, you know.
How you simultaneously juggle multiple scenarios.
I've had practice juggling my multiple personalities. Always wanted to carve this bird. I mean, Riddler knew? Riddler!
Brent Spiner is a talented actor with plenty of star power, pun intended. But he just never really clicked with this character, especially not in this particular series. His act always felt a little bit too much like an act. It was very over the top and theatrical in nature. Spiner was in the studio chewing so much scenery that he was probably picking animated batarangs out of his teeth for days to come, rolling his R's while he's speaking in Shakespearean sonnets. In my opinion, this was far too hammy and over the top for Young Justice. However, I think Brent would be right at home if he was instead attached to a Brave and a Bold type project or those old Scooby-Doo team-ups. If we're judging this Joker by those standards, then I would say it holds up. I still don't think it would be anybody's favorite version of the villain, but it would at least feel like a valid version of the villain. It's not my Joker, but it is a Joker. On this show, however, it feels incredibly off-putting and out of place. As if the Joker from the Silver Age was somehow transported into the modern era. This character just felt grossly misplaced, and Brent Spiner felt mostly miscast. He constantly clashes with the show tonally, and it feels like the narrative grinds to a halt whenever he's included in a story. Even the character's characterization feels much more akin to the old-school Joker, as he's pretty much a goofy, ineffective loon who more often than not is the butt of the joke. Now, if all of that wasn't bad enough, which I think that it is, what makes matters even worse is when you remember all this Joker is supposed to be responsible for in this series. True, he only makes 2 major speaking appearances, but a lot of Young Justice's story is subtly told in the background with the passing of time. Time jumps are all too common in this series. More often than not, the show skips some of the most important moments in DC continuity. So this Joker, despite coming off as a cameo, is still responsible for a lot of crime and chaos. When you're taking this much sillier and, for lack of a better word, stupid iteration of this character into account, it's near impossible to think of this character doing all that he was responsible for. It's hard to imagine this Joker beating and brutalizing Jason Todd, yet it's implied that that's its canon. All these impactful moments with that implied past doesn't hold the same narrative weight when it's this bozo orchestrating the anarchy. When the show silently references these events, it couldn't feel any more off. This would be like trying to imagine Cesar Romero's Joker paralyzing Barbara Gordon in The Killing Joke, or Jeff Bennett's Joker abusing Harley like other Jokers have been known to do, or trying to envision the Joker from those old Scooby-Doo cartoons I referenced earlier cutting off his own face. My point is that it just doesn't work with this depiction. And this depiction just doesn't work in general. It fails in every way that you hope it would succeed. Which is why, without a shadow of a doubt, this is the worst of the worst of cartoon clowns. Prove me wrong in the comments. Now, I know that some people would put earlier versions of the character as the absolute bottom of the barrel, but I think that they kinda just barely surpassed that with the crutch of time. When you take into account what the character was and how he was depicted in comics at the time, taking note that they were trying to sell this character to the youngest demographic imaginable, you realize that these portrayals, while not perfect, are still very much in their element. For me, Brent has to be the worst because he is so far removed from his. I would probably look back on this part much more fondly had he been around during the earlier years. If he was portraying Golden Age Joker, there really isn't much you can complain about. Because once again, it's not my Joker, but it is a Joker. The way that he went about this part in the series that he was a part of is what makes this stand out that much more. And for me, that's what makes this an all-time low for the character. It just seems very out of date and very out of touch for the landscape that it's in. With all due respect to Brent Spiner, who is a fantastic actor that I very so much enjoy in everything else I've ever seen him in. If you're looking for evidence of this man's talent, for mere moments he made the movie Master of Disguise somewhat watchable. That's nothing to sneeze at. But this just wasn't it. It wasn't it for him or for us. He's had much better roles and we've had much better Jokers. You would think, given this specific performance, that the studio would say, "Hey Brent, thanks for coming. Your stay was short, but you still overstayed your welcome." And then shut the door on that iteration of the Joker forever. However, you would be very wrong. Because instead, following that introduction, Warner Brothers let that man inside, bringing Brent back to voice the character in their reincarnation of Radio, Batman the Audio Adventures.
Hold on. This is news to me. I gotta process this. Are you telling me bowler hats are back in, Eddie? Milt says it's a matchstick. Is that right? I don't get it. Oh, I get it. I don't like it. You're talented. You don't deserve the names people call you.
What do people call me?
In this one, Everybody falls in love in the end.
While I'm still not a huge fan, I will say that the tone of the audio adventures does better suit the clown that's in ill-fitting suits. It's a huge improvement, and it really goes to show you how an actor not only has to be the right person for the part, but also how an actor could potentially be the right person for the part, but that part is just in the wrong place. Once again, I don't think Brent Spiner is ever gonna break through the top 10 Jokers list. Hell, I wouldn't even put him on the top 20. But I will say that he is much better here than he was over there, just based on the story and setting that surrounds the character. I admire Brent as an actor, but I don't admire him as a criminal clown. In my opinion, he is the worst Joker we've ever gotten. But that's also not a position that I would say that he's in alone.
No. There is another.
This one's gonna be a short video. Mainly because the Joker in question, who I will go on to question as a Joker, didn't get a whole lot of screen time. Not that anyone's complaining. I spoke recently about who I felt was the worst Joker ever animated, and in that video I mentioned that there was one who was just as bad. But I want to take that back, because that was actually a factually inaccurate statement. Because this one is the by far worst, the absolute bottom of the clown barrel. Far worse than the Joker from Young Justice is the Joker from Injustice. And I'm not talking about the video games either. That's a completely different actor for a completely different video. I'm talking about this piss-poor iteration of the Joker in this piss-poor adaptation of Injustice, who is every bit as bad as the movie that he's in.
Well. Imagine meeting you here, Lotus. I'm pulling the best joke ever. It'll be my masterpiece. Time to go, honey. Good guys are coming and they tend to get punchy.
He made an impression, but it wasn't one that you'd want to make. Even though there's only a little time spent with this villain, it's not exactly time well spent. The character just fails on every level imaginable. If you're comparing him to his in-game counterpart, he falls short.
Oh no! This time, the joke's on you, and the world will burn.
That's why I like you, Superman. You're much more gullible than...
And if you try to compare him to whatever standards you already have for the character, once again he falls short of the mark.
And it was as easy as beating a puppy to death with a kitten!
That actually is pretty funny.
So, apologies to Brent Spiner, because while Brent didn't give a good Joker performance in my opinion, he still gave a Joker performance. But Kevin Pollak couldn't even be bothered. Though the two are very different, I have the same exact problem with this performance as I do with Brent Spiner's. The story portrays it as a more modern take on the character, a chaotic clown who only lives to make other people's pain his own punchline. However, the actual performance depicts him as being a goofy dope who just makes bad jokes. Sure, you could say that Mark Hamill managed to meet somewhere in the middle and create a much more nuanced take that combined these two elements, but Mark Hamill this is not. The look is current, but the actual performance is taken straight out of the Silver Age. And when combined, it just doesn't work. Actually, come to think of it, it doesn't work separately here either, because if I'm just judging this based on the look, well then it's bad. But if I'm basing this on the performance, well then it's really bad. The voice does seem like a much better fit for the earlier renditions of the criminal clown, but still, even taken out of this and put in that environment, I still think it's the bottom of the barrel. Upon re-watching Injustice, I would have to argue that this Joker is far worse than that Joker. And you know what? I think he might even be worse than this Joker. Maybe. Maybe. Whereas Brent Spiner's Joker was a good actor with a bad Joker performance, Kevin Pollak's is a good actor with a bad overall performance. Brent was out of his element, but in the right setting he would be acceptable in the role. This Joker would fail in any setting. It's a mistake in makeup. I don't know that there's a backdrop you could drop this Joker in to make his performance feel right at home or, well, honestly, even tolerable. It's pretty bad. What I can't seem to understand is that if they were adapting the video game's lore, why not just include the same actor from the games? Richard Epcar is a solid Joker. I know he's not everybody's favorite, and some people have opinions of him that aren't always all that great, but in my perspective, I think he's fine.
Well, then you are lost!
Richard Epcar is a solid Joker. I know he's not a whole lot of people's favorites, but he's a lot more beloved than this guy is. I understand that the main cast from the game wasn't brought to home video. Not entirely sure why, but I understand that. But they probably should have made an exception here. The tools were right there for them to use. They just chose to instead use sticks and dirt. Well, at the very least, you could say that this is a performance that matches the movie it's a part of. Though it's confusing because Kevin is actually a very talented individual. He's an incredible impressionist who can pull off a variety of voices, sometimes doing impersonation so well that if you closed your eyes, you'd believe you were talking to the real thing.
Frankenstein never scared me. Marsupials do, because they're fast.
Oh, don't be frightened. Down, Mr. Happy. Oh, don't be frightened. Down, Mr. Happy.
Excuse me, miss. Well, fact of the matter is, some of the fellas have asked me to inquire as to how long you think this might actually take.
Stardate 2, 4, 6.5. And the behavior of my crew, although the faces seem the same.
So to see him fail in such a major way is both shocking and unsatisfying. I don't know, I guess maybe this one wasn't in his arsenal, which is totally valid. Not everyone can do everything. Not every part is for every actor. This was just a bad combination in terms of actor and adaptation. A very unholy union that did much more bad than it did good. It's just bad all around any way you look at it. Although speaking of look, what is this? What in the diet Heath Ledger am I looking at here? They really didn't have to do anything different than they did in the game. The game's Joker was perfectly fine in both design and depiction. Somehow this movie wronged him in both. It looks like they attempted to recreate the look of the games, but then they also tried to mix and match it with some of his more iconic and somewhat generic looks. And in doing so, they did a massive disservice to all of them. So once again, apologies to Brent Spiner. I must admit, I was wrong. I was absolutely wrong. Brent and Kevin do not share a spot for the worst Joker. Kevin is number one, always and forever. -1.
Only the very best for you, Harley.
There's just nothing special or unique about this version of the character. Ultimately, the movie makes him an afterthought in what they were trying to achieve. Kev, big fan, but this villain thing, it's not for you, pal. Go back to clown school.
Always playing your cards close to the vest. You can't do that when one of those cards is the Joker.
If I said this one was going to be short and sweet, it would be a half-truth. Today we're going to discuss one of the Jokers in gaming. As of right now, Richard Epcar is voicing the character on consoles, and has been doing so since 2008's Mortal Kombat vs. DC. From what I can see, he's very divisive amongst fans. There are those who hate it, and then there are those who tolerate it. But however you feel about the Thunder God turned Jester, I think we can all agree that his portrayal is leaps and bounds better than the video game Jokers that came before him. Because I think this is yet another case of a contender for the worst Joker. This is undoubtedly the worst Joker in video games, at least. You know, I still think that itself might be a little bit of an understatement as well. Because this could be the worst Joker of all time. Look, I know I've said that before, but I think in hindsight I may have misspoke. Comparatively speaking, this makes Brent Spiner sound like Mark Hamill. I don't think it quite overthrows Kevin Pollak in Injustice, but it's equally as bad. As a matter of fact, I'm just gonna state it, they're sharing a spot for the worst. I'm talking about the Joker from Batman Dark Tomorrow. In the 2003 game, the part was played by actor Alan Enlow, who chose to play the part like an out-of-work clown with a sinus infection.
On the nosy! Say, you're good at this.
Hello, darling. So glad you could make it. Kidnapping Commissioner Gordon.
Tut, tut, tut! And now,
for what's behind door number 2.
No, we'll save that for another time, won't we? It's playtime now.
Pshaw! Child's play! I could do it every day of the week before breakfast.
But you didn't.
Well, of course not. What's fun about it?
Been taken care of. Nice
Mommy.
work. Thanks. I'll contact Robin.
I don't think I really need to point out what the problem is there. The performance sort of speaks for itself, and I think after hearing it speak, we all wish that it wouldn't. The voice itself sounds far too nasally and a little bit too mousy. It's less criminal clown and more children's TV show host. Not to mention, it almost sounds like he's speaking with a vaguely posh accent as well. And I don't know where that comes from, but I wish it would go back there because it just doesn't feel right coming out of the Joker. He sounds like the Queen's Court Jester. He sounds like a parody of what someone would consider to be proper. But then again, that's only one of 12 different things he's doing with his voice all at once. None of them good. It almost feels like when he falls out of one performance, he just kind of switches over to another one mid-sentence. I can't get an actual feel for what it is the actor's going for. His voice is only highlighted by the fact that he won't stop speaking. He's all over the place. And he gives a performance that feels like it's fueled by ADHD and speed.
That's a bad combination.
This is one of the hammiest Jokers I've ever seen. So much so that it almost seems too silly for the Silver Age. Cesar Romero's Joker would probably even tell this guy to calm it down. I will say though, in his defense, he did have a chaotic cackle.
It's a little, unsettling.
But it is the one good quality that this portrayal offers players. I don't hate the look. It doesn't really do anything new with the character, but then again, it doesn't have to. Yeah, it's simple and generic, but it's done well, and that's what's important. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel. Outside of that, though, I struggle to see any positives with this performance. Though the problems don't begin and end with the person playing the part. As a matter of fact, the biggest issue is the way the character is written and how poorly he's utilized in the story. He doesn't come off as diabolical, he comes off as dopey, which is emphasized by a plot that plays him for a laugh. Now, look, I understand why they might think that that's the way to go with a character named the Joker, but despite what his name might imply, you should never play the Joker for a joke. It feels especially out of place here when the rest of the rogues are showcased as the serious threats they are, and he's written to be some bad B-lister at best. Just think of the Joker being an afterthought and a total non-factor to Batman. Just because the character wasn't a huge part of the plot doesn't necessitate a depiction that feels more like parody. The character is such a joke that he's the only villain that doesn't engage with Batman in some sort of boss fight, and instead sends his lackeys after the Dark Knight, officially being beaten by a half-hearted punch when Batman wasn't even looking in his direction. As a matter of fact, when the Joker jokes and acts as if he's the brains behind the game's plot, Batman scoffs at the idea and basically states that the Joker is incapable of doing as such.
I know you weren't behind all this, Joker.
What? You don't think I could have pulled all this off?
The Joker, the criminal mastermind, one of the most intelligent enemies the Dark Knight has ever faced.
None other.
Goofy in nature, sure, but there are very few things this man is incapable of, outside of compassion. Yet the game doesn't even make him an obstacle for Batman, but instead a slight inconvenience. I know we're past this portrayal of the character now, but we were kind of already past this type of portrayal for the character back then as well. The Joker happily playing a part in someone else's plan is extremely out of character. It's almost on the same level as Batman killing somebody. I don't doubt that the Joker would act like he was part of someone else's agenda, but that would really only be if he had his own personal plans. Outside of Harley Quinn, Joker partnerships are pretty short-lived, and there's good reason for that. Having the character written off as a willing pawn, I think shows a fundamental misunderstanding, or at least mishandling of the character. And I think it's clear that I've definitely given way more thought to this character than the developers did. Probably far too much thought, actually, for a game that came out in 2003. Batman Dark Tomorrow's interpretation of the character basically boils down to bad laughing man. At the end of the day, this has to be seen as the worst Joker in the worst Batman game. If you like this video and want to see more of the worst or more obscure Jokers out there, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was V Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.